just talking about PNSQC. Let's see if I can go to the next page here. The organization. The organization has been going on. This is the 42nd year for a conference. PNSQC stands for the Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference. The topics are specifically about software quality. And if you can believe it or not, people were talking about software quality, more than 42 years ago, and we're still talking about it. It's held annually in Portland, Oregon. We actually, for 2 years, we were virtual. I think it was 2020 and 2021. And then we went back to having an in-person conference in 2022. So we had it downtown Portland, and this year it'll be at the University Place in Portland, Oregon. It's a nonprofit organization, all volunteers. We focus on the quality practitioner. So some people take that to mean testing, and some people take it beyond that. In fact, next in June, the topic for the PNSQC Meetup is going to be quality beyond testing. So that'll be an interesting one, hosted by PNSQC board member Yin-Ki Kwong. Generally at the conference, we have 3 tracks, kind of one about management, one about tools, and one about kind of cutting edge technology. This year, of course, the cutting edge technology is focusing a lot on AI, and we actually incorporated that into the name of the track. It's AI and other tech. And we just closed our call for proposals for the conference on Monday at midnight, and we got quite a few proposals. It was a nice turnout. And so these people who have submitted ideas for talks at the conference will work with PNSQC volunteers and reviewers over the summer to develop a technical paper that they'll present at the conference on their topics. What's next? So today's agenda, we're talking about the politics of Agile. And actually this topic was inspired by Jeremy, who's in the meeting today. So you can thank him for talking about that. And I thought about who is somebody who might want to talk about the politics of Agile without being too politically correct, I guess is the word. And I was thinking, how about Paige and Steve? They have a software coding, or what's it called? The Seattle. Can you guys just tell me what the
Seattle Code Crafters Meetup?
Yeah. And so they like to talk about code more than testing, but they also integrate testing into coding. And in fact, they also are coaches for doing things agilely. And I asked them to describe their roles, and it just came with the kind of code crafters and developers and people who do things agilely, all things agilely. And I'm interested to find out what all things might include. So one thing before we start to talk, I just wanted to mention that PNSQC really is all volunteers. And so that we have a lot of people. This is actually from the Quality Jam, copy and paste. I'm a developer, so I do that. But I'm looking forward to PNSQC 2024 in October, because we really had a lot of a good turnout of suggestions. And I've also reached out to a lot of different people for doing the keynote and the invited talks. We're going to have Bas Dijkstra from Holland, who talks about automation, and we're going to have Michael Bolton as a keynote. And we're also going to have Michael Larson and Matt Heusser. Michael Larson, I think, is on the call right now. They just have a book out about lean testing. So that should be interesting. So I just wanted to plug all those things. Okay, I'm going to stop my share out of that.
Moss, can I have 1 second?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to let everyone know that we have started our 2024 campaign, fundraising campaign. Our goal is to raise money for a combination of supporting speakers to travel to PNSQC in October, but also to provide a range of training opportunities that is at a reduced cost. potentially subsidized or free to our members. So I'm going to insert a link in a minute in the chat screen, and all of you, if you have a chance, please do take a look at our fundraising letter, and if possible, make a donation to PNSQC for a good cause. Thank you very much.
And also just thinking about it, thanks, Yankee, for mentioning that. It doesn't have to be a personal donation. If your company you think might be interested in supporting PNSQC, either as a sponsor or just a direct, doing a direct donation, you can suggest that to your company as well.
Right, right. Both corporate and individual gifts are very much welcomed for the cause here. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to spotlight Steve and Paige. Oh, add spotlight. So you guys are spotlighted right now. In the spotlight. Do you want to? You're going to do and the cat spotlight.
I'll hide behind the cat.
You guys are going to do a brief presentation about the roles of just kind of so we have a foundational understanding of what you're describing as the roles of Agile, and then we can start into a little discussion there after that.
Yeah, a little bit.
Sure, maybe.
This is going to be more of a discussion. The topic, the politics of Agile. I did something while you were actually doing the intro, and I asked Gemini, one paragraph about politics of Agile, because we could go into this a number of different ways, but here's what Gemini, or Google's AI, has to say about it. The politics of Agile revolve around the challenges of implementing its principles within existing organizations, structures, and power dynamics. Agile methodologies emphasize collaboration, transparency, and adaptability to change, often clashing with traditional hierarchical management styles focused on control and predictability. This tension can create resistance from those who feel their authority is threatened, as Agile empowers teams with greater decision-making autonomy. Successfully navigating the politics of Agile requires building trust, demonstrating the value of Agile practices, and finding champions within the organization who can advocate for change and help overcome resistance.
You didn't say anything about Scrum.
What? It's not supposed to.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that Paige and I talked about. And I wanted to toss it out and open it up to others. Since one of the things about the roles in Agile, what do people think are the roles in Agile?
Yeah, and you can either just
shout them
out here or put them in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little discussion about this beforehand, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it before we kind of give you our thoughts.
Personally, I always think of it as the team and then the Scrum Master. But then, as I think about it deeper, it's like, oh, Scrum Master, that kind of implies a certain kind of Agile structure, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Framework. So then I don't know who you'd talk about it. The team and then the advocate or whatever, the team and then the lawyer that stands between you and the business. I don't know.
I'd like to make a quick comment, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Some of you may know Ward Cunningham from having attended our conference and made presentations, and of course, as the author of the Agile Manifesto. Since the word politics appears in kind of today's session, I want to point out that 1 year I had a talk with Ward Cunningham, and I pulled him aside and I said, hey, you Agile Manifesto folks, I said, is it possible that you guys are a bunch of idealists?
Mm-hmm.
And then he'd say, what do you mean by that? And I say, well, real organizations, you don't just have well-meaning business people coming together with well-meaning technologists to make software. What we have is a lot of political complexity. And Ward Cunningham's reaction to me was kind of interesting.
Oh, did we lose him?
And Ward made his internet crash because he's that powerful.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. He's still there.
Seemed
We
to come
can't
just
hear
at
you.
came just at the punchline too.
Yeah.
Right.
Oops.
So when we get him back,
We'll come
we'll hear
back,
the rest
yeah.
of it. But what about the, oh, are you back there?
Am I back?
Yes. Yes.
Oh man, now I can't hear any of you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know where I was cut off, but I was just going to make the comment that Watt Cunningham confirmed that maybe they're not a bunch of idealists, but they did not take into account anything about political and organizational complexity when they wrote the Agile Manifesto. That's my comment.
Yeah. I think that's very valid. When Paige and I were thinking about it, what are the roles? And of course, in some of our heads, very, very much like Moss says, Scrum Master came to mind, and it's like, oh, then product owner and then developer. And it's like, wait, no, we're thinking Scrum. What about Agile? So asked ourselves, what does Agile actually have to say about that? And so we went to the manifesto. And the first page of the manifesto with the intro and the 4 values and such doesn't mention any roles, but the 12 principles actually highlight some roles in there. And they talk about some roles.
Yeah.
There's business people and developers. There's a customer, motivated individuals they mention, sponsors, then developers and users. And then here's an interesting one: self-organizing teams as a role, specifically called out in one of the principles. So what do folks think of that?
Well, there are self-organizing teams in which people are motivated and empowered to take leads. And then, especially in government organization where I work, often the self-organized teams consist of people that are, like resistance to change, not empowered to make necessary decisions, and contractors that are driven primarily by the profit motive.
Yeah, I was making the joke of self-organized teams. We're gonna tell them what they can work on, and how they're gonna do the work, but they're self-organized. So
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting that like we've come to this place where we have, when you say what are the roles of Agile development, what roles are there, and we immediately kind of go to this framework and these roles that are associated with this framework or that framework, as opposed to thinking about really what it is that we're trying to explain and get done. Because when I was first looking at this, and the question was, can talk a little bit about the roles in Agile, I was like, are there? That's a hard one for me, because I think when Steve and I first worked at Primera Blue Cross a couple years ago, we all had the same title. We were solutions providers or solutions developers. And that didn't matter, whether you were a developer or a business analyst or a tester or, a PM or whatever on the team. If you were on the team, you were a solution developer because you developed a solution. And that, like, to me, is one of those things where really that's the role. Maybe there's a customer, right? Because you're developing a solution for someone. I don't know if that's the name I'd use, but I don't see much in the way of other roles.
The one thing I was thinking about just now is when I first tried doing something agile in an agile method, I read the what is it, the XP handbook? Is that what it's called? What's the guy's name? It escapes me now. And he described being agile is basically driving a car. You plan a route where you're going to go, and then excellent. That's it. Kent Beck. Sorry, Kent. I totally blew his mind or his name away. You're driving a car somewhere. You have a goal in mind, so you kind of plot out where you're going to go from your current position to your new destination. And then you don't plot everything out exactly like a huge monolithic graph of where you're going to get gas and where you're going to eat and where you're going to sleep exactly. You might kind of make a couple of estimates, and then you start driving along the road and you follow the road, but you got to follow certain turns. And for even second to second, you have to navigate this path along the road, but somehow you manage to make it from your your start to your destination pretty much as you're doing. And so that's the way I thought of agile development. But then I realized there's no road for what we're doing a lot of times. We don't know, even when we're doing estimates, we don't know, is this a long day? How far is it? Are we going to get there in time? And so then you start doing these things, and I tried to implement agile without certain artifacts. Like, for example, having an iteration is a nice thing to give you safety in terms of, like how long is a day or 2 weeks or a month or whatever that you're going to be working on something. And also, what do you consider a destination that's achievable within a certain amount of time and that kind of stuff. But I really never had flexibility in the team. All we had was the team that I had. I couldn't hire somebody and bring somebody else in unless it was over a long term. And usually it wasn't very flexible or agile for a project. So then that's kind of the team is often the thing that you're given, and you don't have a lot of ability to change that, but you can still change the roles. You can say, okay, suddenly I'm a scrum master, you're the product owner, you're going to be telling me what we want to work on, what we want to focus on, and so on. Okay, I guess that was enough of my point. It's just that there are lots of parameters that you can adjust, but usually the team and the roles are not something that you can do except for through name, or concepts. I see that Julie has a question. I'll stop talking.
Well, I just wanted to provide my input in terms of, I think we need to be careful of, and if it's clear for you, perhaps defining that and mixing up the word role with job description. I mean, I think that in Agile, the whole point of everybody's role to create working software. That's the role of a person on an Agile team. Your job description might be different. You might be mainly a developer or mainly in QA or whatever it is, but make sure that those are two separate discussions, I think.
Yeah,
I would like to offer up something. Is we're talking about roles, and very very valid points being brought up, and we're about delivering software. And thank you, Julie, for bringing up the separation between role and a job description. I think this really highlights, number one, the title of this is Politics of Agile. And one of the questions that we led off with is, well, let's define some of the roles. And then the paragraph that I read that AI generated, talking about tension between delivering software and the business of writing software. And this really highlights that, because we're talking what roles, what this, it's about delivering software. So why is there tension in, well, my job title is this, but my role on the team is something different? Or did I just make a big cognitive leap?
I have a thought that may be pertinent, Ying here. And let me try to do this by making a small tangent. People that need to manage projects, project managers, classical project management is very concerned with scope creep. It's like the more scope you add, it's going to use up resources, it's going to be late. And that is to be balanced by, often from the product owner's perspective, kind of beneficial change. If you're building a software, the requirement doesn't quite meet business need, for example, or circumstances have evolved and it's necessary to make adjustment, then there will be beneficial change. Some of them may lead to scope creep, but it may also lead to scope reduction in certain areas. So I think the tension ultimately, if done correctly, right size scope and therefore resources needed like budget and personnel, and hopefully allow you to meet schedule requirements by having at least a minimal viable product when you need to go live, that type of thing. But I think that it's not just in Agile, but really in all methodology, SDLC methodology, there is always this need to balance what I consider necessary control and scope from the perspective of scope creep versus the necessary and beneficial changes that were you not to make them, well, the project would not be successful, even if technically everything works.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very valid point. I mean, there's what is asked, and there are different tangents on that as well too. There's what is asked for, which as you get, most of the time, the people are asking for something. A lot of times they don't know what they really want. They have an idea of what they want, but not exactly what they want. And so that's where there's some tension. There's the tension of, yes, we could do this and do this exact thing, but if we did it just a slightly different way, it might get it faster. Or, if we did this the fastest way possible, quality is going to suffer. Or if we did it if we've got this legacy code base, we have to address some issues in the legacy code base first before you start delivering things. And that's, I think, where, Moss put the question in there. Why is there tension between the role and the team goal? Is sometimes I look as a developer as my role is the voice of the code. And I've had I'd say more often than not, the product owner or the project manager is saying, just get this thing done. I don't care about the state of the code. You can take on all this technical debt that you're highlighting, and we'll pay for it later. And we ship a product, and we never get time as developers to address the technical debt that was laid, that we were told to put in. Ill-advised. We never get a chance to clean things up.
I want to step back just a little bit because there is something that I think if we're going to talk politics, let's just talk politics, right? There is something that I think that we don't always address, and yet we seem to accept that it's true, and that's that we have this SDLC and it is correct, and it is the way that we build software, and it's the way we should build software. And the idea that we have all the requirements and know all the requirements and we know what the finished product should be up front is not always, and I would say often not the best way to make a quality product correctly. And I think that we get stuck in this. We're gonna make requirements, and the customer is going to come up with the requirements, whether that's a business or a product person or whatnot, and they're going to give it to the development team, and the development team's going to build that. And here's our roadmap for we're going to build this and then that and then that. And I think that one of the things that Agile gives us that we don't grab hold of, we don't deal with, is this ability to say that's not the best way to build this, right? Yes, we need requirements. Yes, we need an understanding of, gosh, we're going to build an app. We need a database. We need to connect to this whatever provider. We need an understanding of all those things. But sometimes we lay out the path because of how we've done it in the past. And what we should be doing is saying, for example, what's the what's the hardest thing? What's the thing that's going to stop us if we can't get this done? And let's do that first. And let's write that code first. And we don't, and then let's come back and change the other things around it. Like, I don't know if I'm getting to the point of what I'm trying to say, but I think that sometimes we get so stuck in this idea of how we build software that we don't open ourselves up to allowing us to change this idea of how we build software, this idea of thinking about different and better ways. And the really amazing teams, the really amazing practices that I've done, and the amazing applications that I built have all been around these teams that are like, not let's try this framework, not let's do this, but let's experiment and let's figure out what works for us on this team at this time for this application. And let's throw everything out the window and do it this other way. And I think that's important. And I think that's where we need to go, but I don't think it's easy. Right. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I want to tag on just a little bit to what Paige is talking about. I've heard this from a number of manifesto signatories, not from Ward, but from Ron Jeffries, from Wingman Software. I'm really bad with names, and other folks from Bob Martin.
Yeah.
If you're doing Agile the same way you were doing Agile 3 months ago, you're not Agile. And I think a number of people might be nodding their heads going, yes. And a number of people might feel a tension in there. And that's sort of the politics of Agile.
Maybe I can add a little bit of nuance to what you both just said, by way of an example. I was helping a nonprofit kind of in the mental health area to deal with a project that was funded by a foundation, but the management didn't think it was going well at all. And so I interviewed kind of in 3 separate groups of people trying to understand the situation. The technical people involved, there was a couple of IT people that work with a team of developers. They thought everything was just great. It was a great technical success. Then I talked to the people responsible for using the billing aspects of the system, because services rendered, you have to bill to get money for the organization so they can be solvent. They said, yeah, it's not very user-friendly, but it generally works. As far as they're concerned, meets business requirement, but not very good software in terms of usability and whatnot. And then finally, I meet the clinician. And when I said that folks in the technical side thought that things were going great because they're not getting any complaints, everything seemed to meet requirements, the clinician actually bursted out laughing. They said, we gave up giving them comments because we never got what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a glorified typewriter. Was what they call it.
Yep.
So I helped the management put together a memo to the foundation that funded this thing, because they're terribly afraid that the foundation will stop giving them money, not just for the IT project, but for everything else that they're funding them on. So we basically declared the project to be a technical success, but unfortunately does not meet business need. That was the best thing we could do under the circumstances. I'm just playing with words, but that seemed to have met the, as you say, the politics of the Agile. They use the Agile methodology, of course. The politics of the Agile here is that the only way out was to call it a technical success, which really is another euphemism for it didn't work well and it was not a success.
So that's interesting you bring that up, because to me, it points out an issue that I see over and over and over. And that's when you have a team that is practicing some sort of Agile methodology, whether it has a name or not, but the rest of the company isn't, right? Your customer isn't, your product management organization isn't, whatnot. I think there's an issue there that needs to be resolved in terms of how we make the software, right? If you were talking about, and I don't know anything about the situation, but you were talking about like, your customer or the billing department was like, yeah, it's okay. And the development team was like, well, it must be fine because we're not hearing any negative feedback. My first thought was like, why is the development team not getting people from the billing team to show up at their and talk with them about, new features that they're adding, and like this feedback aspect of working with the rest of the company or the customers, and it's very much called out in our principles and the manifesto of having that direct interaction with your customer, and yet we don't necessarily do it as much as we could, or even probably as we should. I don't want to say should, but like it would be so much better to get that rapid and immediate feedback and learn and grow from that. And yet we're expecting the development teams to be agile, but the rest of the company does other things. Julie?
Yeah, there's a few points there that all lead into the same thing for me. I'd like to challenge the comment that if you're doing Agile the same way, in 3 months' time, you're not Agile, and that I'll talk to that in a second. But also in developing software where it's technically correct, but it doesn't really match what is needed. All of this talks to me. I think we really need to remind ourselves that Agile is not a methodology, it's not a structure, it's a set of principles. And it's almost like going out into the real world. It's like you're going to come across endless scenarios, but if your principle is be nice, then you can apply that no matter how anybody else is interacting with you, or how it works. So it doesn't matter if the whole company is working in a different way. If you apply the principles to be reasonable, then you should come out with a successful result. And again, I believe that it's the same way as I approach any automation framework. As long as your framework is extremely strong yet extremely flexible, then you can allow everybody else to work in whichever way they want, as long as, again, you follow certain principles and you address those things in a certain way. You should be successful at the end of the day. That's a big should. We're all in quality. We know how that often works. And I just want to put on to the end of that, it's almost like the same as when you talk about the different roles. I just want to add on again about everybody being accountable in roles, and potentially being told if they come in as a developer, for example, and then being told you're responsible for quality of the product, and then you're not a tester, but you've got to write all these test cases. I do think that's one of the things that is missed in Agile teams, where companies, we've all been through this stage again, where companies have said, we don't need testers anymore, developers are going to test. So that's fine. The problem with all of that, of course, is that for everybody to be accountable and for the team to be self-organizing, you still need individuals with certain skill sets. It just means that when a bug or something happens, everybody comes together, you have a look at it, you decide, okay, this is where the failure has occurred, so who is the best person amongst us with that skill set to help move it forward, to get rid of the impediment. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that a developer needs to be the tester kind of thing. It just means if the bug happens to be a development bug, that's who deals with it. If it's a testing bug, that's who deals with it. If it's a business bug, that's who deals with it. So that's why I just think as long as you go back to the principles, it really helps with that. And that's, it's Agile. That's the whole point of agility, right? And if you think of an athlete, what makes an athlete agile is the sort of the muscles and the training that they do internally. If they stick to that, they're probably going to be successful. It's a little bit ethereal, I know, but I just like to come back to that, because I think we like to get sucked into what a structure might be and how we're supposed to be doing things.
Bear?
That's good. That's good stuff. So
yeah, so that's an interesting, I like that. And one of the things that I've wondered, so I've always worked in dev or as project manager, And QA was a large portion of my job as someone who mentored junior associates. I am a user-centric developer. I've never been responsible for the tech debt side. Luckily, I've never been a lead on anything. But what I have found in situations where QA was trying to integrate with the broader team, as engineers or developers are asked to start to stop thinking about the code and the build and start thinking about the user experience, animosity is created and it throws off the balance. So the self-organization part of Agile becomes a bit fractured because then there's competing interests because engineers are already overwhelmed trying to build it, think about the functions, usually with not as many clear expectations of the software that they need. And so I wonder if it's possible to have a working and successful self-organization methodology whenever you're asking developers and engineers to then be QA and not having a separation of the two, because I will always look out for the end user and I don't need my developers to do that. And that's like going to a surgeon for, brain surgery who's ever only done foot surgery. You're asking them to do different things in a way, unless they are user focused. And I have worked with some other developers who are, but a lot of times that is the last focus. They are really focused on the code base, using the right stack, understanding how to best deliver it. I mean, which JavaScripts are they going to be using? So there's a lot of other focuses that their skills are more valuable in.
There are absolutely frameworks out there, and I'm going into frameworks that encourage highly collaborative work. My interpretation of Agile is that there are still roles within it. Our people can still have specializations, and they call them T-shaped individuals when it's been talked about. And the tester T-shape is very valuable. The developer T-shape is very valuable and has many different Ts. So is the organizational side. It has to do with broadening that skill set around. Paige and I just came off of an engagement where we had 12 to 16 developers that were self-organizing. We were working in swarms, small swarms, anywhere from 2 to 4. There were a couple QA assets that were assigned to the team. We were not able to bring them into Ensemble with us due to the organizational structure, and we were outside contractors coming in. But we were able to bring them in a dynamic way that leveraged the skill set that is awesome for QA, which is not going through a test plan and redoing it every day for the rest of your life, which to me is against the Geneva Convention. But they saw how we wrote code. They saw that we were doing it TDD, and they saw the constraints of TDD, which there are, and they were able to poke at the hard parts, the edges, the exciting things that QA is good for, that loves to do. And then they were able to find the holes that the developers didn't think of.
Yeah, they
I'd
were
like
able.
I'd like to add a comment to this somewhat abstract notion of the first principle in user experience. I think, as I say, those could be abstract aspects of functionalities. But there are aspects of functionalities where good intention alone simply isn't enough.
Mhm.
And what I have in mind, for example, is mandated workflow in a highly regulated industry, for example. I mean, you can improve the user experience by bypassing required workflow, for example. And you cannot bypass, in the name of user experience, things to keep payment secure that for example, need to comply with PCI standards, things like that. And you cannot have improvement in user experience at the name of things that potentially can introduce risk to human lives and things of that sort. And obviously, with some of our very visible airplane related accidents, we all know the importance of not only testing, but independent testing to help verify that products are built according to specs. That's called verification. And in fact, things actually meet stated requirements. That's called, validation, that it complies with required regulatory requirements. It comply with industry standard requirements such as e-payment, and the system is in fact secure, and so forth. So I think there's often a conflation of people designing not very mission critical software where the team get together and creatively improve the user experience, like varying the color, changing the UI. It's all great. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's this other class of software where it's crucially important for personal identifiable information to be secure, that it complies with industry standard with payments, that it does not unnecessarily expose data to those that don't need to know. And then above all, when it's a product like a plane, there got to be ways to assure that it doesn't dive into the ocean. And you can say, well, a good experience on a plane shouldn't include it diving into the ocean. But I don't think, to call that user experience is kind of like you can say it's necessary but not sufficient, because there's volumes and volumes of requirements, procedures and things like that. And I worked in the government, like the state's Medicaid program, for example. There are procedures and manuals. You have to follow those processes. You cannot be creative in the name of user experience. So I'll turn the floor back to the speakers.
I very much agree with you. There are definitely times and applications where security and vulnerabilities and all those sort of things are life and death, or even Steve and I have worked in health insurance, right? We had to be very aware of PII, personally identifiable information, and that sort of thing. In fact, that was always sort of, that security aspect was always part of our work. But I think I kind of want to, I don't think that we're necessarily saying to skip those, right? In the sense of figuring out what the best way to be agile, quote unquote, in this area is. But I think, for instance, we, like one of the rules could have been like, we can't release directly to production to the general public, right? But because it has to be checked for PII and whatnot. But we can set up a CI/CD system that releases right out to the gate, to the point of letting someone else, choose and go through it and make sure it's okay and choose. And that right before that final gate that we have no control over, that is our production, right? And we can do those things that help us get faster, that help the quality get better, that help the outcomes, evolve in around the software and the way we work with those requirements in mind, right? And I guess that's kind of when I was talking about changing the way we build software, I don't mean skipping the important parts, or the required parts, or because nobody wants to write the software that's going to make the plane fall out of the sky. That's just a given. I don't think there's anybody, but I think that there are ways to affect our processes to make the outcomes with those requirements even better and more acceptable to the developers and to the business. Steve?
So here for Paige and I, this is a little bit of a politic. There's some bit in there that, yes, I agree. However, I don't believe in adding gates and constraints into there, and I'll tell you why. Because I've worked on teams where we've rolled QA into the teams. That doesn't mean, okay, getting rid of all QA and now developers are in charge of quality. No, that is absolutely not what that meant in the places that I've been at. That means that the folks that were doing QA were then assigned into and working highly collaboratively with the developers. I'm not talking about the instance where that I mentioned a little bit ago, where we were constrained to throw it over the wall to QA. QA was with us, ensembling with us and part of us. And what that did is, number one, it got everyone on the team thinking about quality. Not just the QA folks, not just the final gate releasing. It allowed us to think about quality from the moment we started writing code to, if we're going to talk about PII, what do we need to secure this throughout the entire system? And it got to the point where it was like, you know what? If number one, we only access that information when we absolutely need to, we only return the PII parts that are necessary to get the job done instead of everything all the time, everywhere, which a lot of enterprise organizations resort to because, hey, we can. And encryption, front to back, always encrypted within the system, doesn't matter, whatever. And then making sure that whoever's calling this back-end service is authenticated and can call that. So with thoughts like that in mind, also bringing security into there as well too. So having security and QA rolled into the team, working with the developers hand in hand, we ensured high quality and high security throughout the whole product, not just at the end as a Band-Aid slapped on top.
Yeah. And just to add a teeny bit, the really nice thing is that since the QA people and the security people, they know their role and their job, they're very good at it, right? They can say to us as developers, here, security, for instance, oh, you shouldn't do it that way. You're going to run into problems if you do this. You're like, as opposed to we write the software over 2 weeks and we throw it over the wall and security looks at it and goes, no, and we're like, what's the problem? No, you can't use this. And like, we just wasted 2 weeks. Why don't you come sit with us, be part of our team, tell us so that we write it, maybe not perfectly, but we write it the best we can in the beginning. You still have that oversight and you still have that ability to guide us to making the most secure and best software. The same with having testers as part of our team. And I think that's for me, that is a much more effective way of having those roles as part of the development cycle. And you do have to have there are rules that you have to follow. We had one at Primera that basically said you had to have 2 people's names on a pull request or something like that. You had to have at least one other person review your code. And so what did that mean? When we were working collaboratively, when we were mobbing or pairing, could the other person put their name on the pull request and approve it? For us, yes, because the rule is you have to have a second person reviewing your code, and we had a second person. We were required to have a pull request for reporting purposes. So we would commit the code, we'd immediately go to the pull request, and someone would put in their name and approve, and it would merge. Now, we didn't cut out that pull request step, but we were able to stay within those requirements, still ensure quality, and yet still produce at a more rapid rate.
Something as we've been talking, one thing I thought about is, and maybe this was also what Jeremy was mentioning. There are two sides to the politics. There's the politics within the team, and then the politics between the team and the rest of the company. And working in the team, I mean, the in the Agile manifesto, they talk about motivated individuals, and I usually try to make the assumption that the individuals aren't deliberately hiding anything. If anything's not being brought to the table, it's either because they're not comfortable discussing it, or they just are thinking about it as something that they have to do. But it's always good to share, especially if there are pains that you experience in the development. You're not working individually as a group; you're working as a team together. It's a soccer team, not a bunch of people doing calisthenics.
Mhm.
And I think that's really important when you're working collaboratively, whether you're ensemble or pairing or something like that. You definitely are working as a team, and you definitely need to be able to have those discussions, right? And it would be nice that if when you're working solo as part of a group of people working on the same function, that you had that safety to always say, here's what I'm doing, here's the importance of what I'm doing, et cetera. I think it's less so when you work as a group of people on the same function than it is when you're working collaboratively, just because of what's the word? My brain just stopped. Just because of the way that the process works. Right. But yeah, the really good teams that I've been on, honestly, funny enough, the really, really good teams and the good places that I've worked, it's really been about safety and communication, and not just amongst the developers, but amongst the company and the team and the customer, being whether that's the stakeholder or the client or whoever else outside of the team. But that idea that it's okay I'm going to tell you exactly what I know and what I'm doing and where I'm at, and you're going to tell me, you're going to give me fast feedback as much as you can, whenever you can, so that I'm clear that I'm on the right track. And if I'm doing something that's not what you expect, we'll stop and talk about it, right? Because that's how we make the better software.
I think Bear had a question.
Oh no, I was clapping. I was
All
clapping
right.
for the comment. I liked yeah, I didn't raise my.
And that communication aspect is a really hard one, I think. It's one of the things that tends to stop a team from becoming great when they have that potential to be. Just that it's one of the questions that we often ask when we're assessing a team. Like, do you have that? Do you feel that you could say what's necessary whenever you need to? Can you raise your hand and go, look, I'm a developer and I know how to create software, and I know what good software looks like, right? And this is it. This is not it. We should be doing this or that, versus, just someone's assigning you work and you're taking the work and you're writing your good code, but you're not even you're not actually fulfilling your role as a developer.
Yinki, I think, has to go, but he had one quick question. And I don't know if this, do you want to ask that, Yinki?
Oh, I'm happy to. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stick around to hear the response. Politics of Agile. I'm just kind of wondering, what is the use of cloud and DevOps have, what impact on the politics of Agile?
I don't think I don't know that I've run into, like, let me think how to put this. My thought is that different teams, doesn't matter, they're, cloud or DevOps or whatnot. If you're clashing with those teams because they're the DevOps teams and they're supposed to be standing up the server and we need it to get stood up and we have to wait for them, or, you know, they're not allowing us to put things in the cloud and we really want to, and that's our mandate and whatnot. Like, the politics aspect there is more around this sort of silo of ownership, as opposed to the company wanting to do the right thing, the company and the developers wanting to make the right software and in the right way. So, like, does that make sense, what I'm saying there? Because I think oftentimes we split things by silo, by role, and you know, I really don't think that's, I was talking about changing the SDLC and changing your company. I don't think that's the best way. I think we should be forming teams around the work. You know, I have this work, who is going to work on it, as opposed to we have an ops team and we have a front end team and we have a back end team, and how are we going to split this work so that everybody gets what their specialty is, right? Well, I think that causes more problems and delays and slows things down. And then you get that ownership and that fiefdom of, well, that's not our job, or you tried to do something that belongs in our code base. You know, go ahead, Steve.
I think if you were to ask in any company that has a cloud-based component, or you know, it has multiple segments, if you had all the resources in your company available to you to get this one thing out the door as quickly as you could, what would you do? I don't think any of them would say, we would create this process of handoffs where it would go to this segment and then to this segment and then to this segment, and it would go through these silos and then eventually get done. I think almost every single company, and I can assure you, if we talk about Boeing and airplanes falling out of the air and the hatch, I can assure you they did not start a process and put it down this series of people. They got all the right people in the room and said, you figure this out now, ASAP. And that's what they did. So, you know, to Paige's point, you know, if and to the question that was asked, if you want to deliver software or deliver something as quickly as possible, you don't create silos. You don't hand them off from department to department. You get everyone there at the same time and do it. And that's what Agile is. That's what the original intent behind the manifesto is, to heal the divide between software and development, or the business and development. And what's happened to me and what I feel, and this is another facet of the politics of Agile, I know we're over time, is Agile's a 4-letter word in a lot of places now. And that movement's growing stronger and stronger and stronger every day. And it is not healing the divide the way it's currently implemented in a majority of places. It's widening the gap.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We don't have to be over time. We can keep going until 1:30, right up to the
Okay.
end if we want. Also, I was going to just mention to anybody that's still here, if you have any question for Steve or Paige about, what brought you to this meetup to hear about the politics of Agile, or if you just have any question, it's almost an AMA. Ask them anything about Agile. I'm sure they'll be willing to answer it.
Yeah, I'm reading your comment and I'm not exactly sure what what you're asking. I have a lot of thoughts about the splitting of work and that sort of thing. But so maybe if you could expand on that in the chat a little bit if you want. And we'll hear Demian.
Yeah, I'm trying to formulate. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. trying to think how best to sort of formulate my comment question, but it seems like sort of like one question is like what is the problem here around sort of the politics of Agile, right? At the start of the session, that there's this I think it was the politics was centered around this tension between sort of existing hierarchical modes and agile, more team-centered. Like, so but there's sort of baked in there is assumption that agile is correct, but it's fighting against these prior hierarchical assumptions, right? So
I think that's good.
Right. I mean, I certainly kind of see that, but I also wondered like a certain amount of that might be conflated with some other comments that have been made here around sort of certain types of software. Maybe they're not suitable for Agile, and right. So there's this like debate of when is it suitable or not, and I wonder too, is complexity a factor here, and like. So that's one thing, like, so, you know, if you're implementing a feature, but it requires that feature that the product manager is sort of focused around requires work from, you know, a dozen or more different teams implementing different parts of that up and down the stack. Like, and that requires a bunch of coordination and, you know, maybe iterations make sense, but having these teams sort of all acting independently in a sort of agile method, maybe there's some tension there as well. And it also makes me think a lot of the sentiment I've heard from developers and testers around Agile is that we're following sort of the letter of Agile, but not really the kind of spirit. So we go through the motions of these various, you know, Scrum ceremonies, but right. So why is that? Is that a politics thing, or management saying, okay, we're going to be agile because that's cool, so we put in these ceremonies, or what leads to that? I don't have answers here. These are sort of the things that I was thinking of as these discussions came about.
Go ahead.
So, Paige and I's friend Quentin Cortell gave a talk about this. It might be recorded on the Seattle Crafter Meetup. He talks that Agile really helped the software industry get better at delivering software, regardless of its foibles, its warts, its bad habits and things like that. Statistically, the industry has gotten better, faster at delivering product since it is adopted Agile. It has not, however, gotten better at discovering what needs to be made and delivered. Right? And I think that touches on a little bit what you're talking about is the original idea behind Agile is to shorten, in my mind, shorten the loop with a customer so you're delivering the right things as quickly as you can. And I could probably count on one hand the number of places that I've worked at where I've actually interacted with an end user of the software, a consumer, a true consumer, getting what they want. And those few times, the magic has been awesome. It's been amazing. We've been able to deliver wonderful things. But, you know, to me, Agile is about interaction with the customer and delivering the barest, simplest thing possible to them and saying, hey, what about this? You like that? How about some other things and tweak it and adjust it? Now, if you're talking huge enterprise scale software like an operating system, say you're someone that's designing an operating system for a new type of computer or human interface device, there's a lot of lead up to that, but there are little things you can do to shorten that loop and get things out faster and iterate. But I don't see the emphasis in any company really in getting customers in front of developers. A lot of times they try and shield customers from developers because, Ellis doesn't shower very much and you don't want them talking with Ellis. No, I'm just kidding. Ellis is completely well groomed. He's fine. I'm picking on him because I know him.
Yeah, I'm going to get a little bit more, which I totally agree, Steve. And it's great because oftentimes I don't have to talk because he just says everything I'm going to say anyways. I want to kind of address something that you were asking about, and I also kind of is asking about this. I think is it's really more around the handoff issue. And there was another question in there about, how does that work when my manager doesn't want my teammates or myself to work with other teams because that's taking time away from us, writing code and producing, and how do we deal with all these things are about separating and slowing down our ability to build the good software at a rapid pace. All these things are about siloing the groups. And why do we do this? I think that was part of your question, Demian, is I don't know. Maybe there's a sort of a need, like that managerial sort of need to own or manage, or I am who I am because I manage 8 teams or whatnot. I don't know what that is, but if we can get rid of that and think about, again, I'm going to use an example. Our friend Quentin and Steve and I worked on, we worked on multiple teams where we look and say, why are these teams separate when they're all dependent on each other? Why do we have an ops team and a QA team, and we have a UI team, and we have a back-end team, when we have this path that has, there's handoffs between each one, and we're dependent on that other team to build this? What if we just shove them all together into a big team and formed around the work? When we've done it, it's worked amazing. It's one of the greatest places, or ways of working. But the political issues that you have to deal with is, what about, is from the management, really? How do I manage this? How do I know that my person that I'm supposed to be in charge of is doing the work that I expect them to? And how do I show my worth to the company as a manager if I'm allowing those under me to make decisions and to work in the way that's most effective for them, but is not in the way that I sort of control? Right. And that's really, when we want to talk about politics, a lot of the time for me, it comes down to that, of trying to help management understand that, again, we know how to make good software. We know what's a good process and what's not. I can ask you, without even asking you to say it out loud, what is the thing that sucks most about making software? And, about you doing your job. And my guess is it has nothing to do with writing code, right? It's those extra things that you have to do of, filling out Jira and estimating, or trying to get communication with this other team because you're dependent on them and they don't answer their email for days, or even knowing what, when you're in a group of people working on a single feature, what are those other people working on. Like these sorts of things, if we can get past that, it really changes the way we build software. And how do I say? One of the problems I have with the way we build software is that a lot of the people, and I'm going to generalize because that's an easy way to do it, and it's not always correct. But a lot of the people who are in a position of making decisions about how we make software are not software developers, did not come up through software development pathways. They went to business school. They learned to be a good business person. They got this job. They know how to manage, but they don't understand proper ways to create software. And I think that really, we need that person in the position of making decisions about how we make software to have been writing software and understand the problems that we have as developers or development teams or testers or whatnot, right? And it's going to take that before it really gets, I don't want to say better, because it's not bad in a lot of places, but in a lot of places it is. And why do companies, I'm going to go forever, this is awesome, why do companies grab onto frameworks and grab onto, like, you were asking, like, oh, we're doing Scrum, that means we're Agile. Well, because they're sold that, because that's definitely, the worst thing that probably could have ever happened is the twice the work in half the time of Scrum, because, well, Scrum is a fine process. I don't think it's necessarily effective at properly building a complex endeavor like software. And I think it has good things that come with it. I think it has good practices, but we should only be using those practices that really are effective for us. And then we should say, this one's a little less effective. Maybe we could try doing something else, or let's change it and do this. Right. But oftentimes we get stuck in the politics of, we've got all these people who teach us this, who their role is set around continuing to keep these practices. And I don't want to just kick Scrum, because it's not just that. But when you have an organization, again, that makes a decision about this is the way we're going to do it all the time, and we put in place those sort of guards to make sure that happens, it becomes very hard to change that. And Jan, you raised your hand really quick there. So
okay. Excuse me, do you have a second for me to talk? Is this a good time?
Sure, yeah, I dig it.
Okay. I was the one who put in the question about the manager who we had a manager of the development team who would really discourage any interaction whatsoever. She thought that her programmers just needed to be, work uninterrupted.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the problem with her was she wasn't a developer. We found that out at the very end. I'm of course a QA, but I think there was a fear of losing control probably. A lot of her programmers wanted the interaction with us, but every single time what would happen is in their Scrum meeting, they would talk about what they did and, oh, I helped so-and-so. And then she would get down on them and say, you're not going fast enough. No, don't contact, this person again.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with somebody? I mean, I know it's fear of control, fear of losing control. I think that's what was going on. I'm not exactly sure, but ways to deal with it would be appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, I could
So-
make bazillions if I came up with an easy way to deal with it.
Yeah, it was really difficult.
Well, and that's there are different types of developers, and there are different types of reasons why developers would say, I'm just interrupted all day long. And that's the most typical thing that I've seen that results in what you're experiencing with a manager saying, don't interrupt my developers.
Mhm.
Is they're saying they're getting interrupted all day long and they're not able to get anything done. And frequently that is because it's very highly siloed work and they have these rigid walls in place. They get stuck on things. And then in order to get in touch with people, they have to have meetings
Mhm.
or people to get in touch with them. So now their day is Swiss cheesed with meetings, and they get, I remember talking with a guy that was, say, the largest corporate coffee company in the world. I'll let you guess who that is. That was saying, I have a half an hour free in my day that I can do my work, write my code, because I have all these meetings. I hate my life. And it's like, but he wanted to do this one little thing and stay silent. I'm like, open it up. Allow people to just, send you a quick email rather than a formal meeting. And he found that once he started letting go, he got more space to do other things. And when his manager allowed him to let go, that's just one example. And it's hard. I feel for that manager because I know that the reason is there's pressures to deliver.
Right.
And they're saying, I'm busy. I keep getting interrupted. How do you say have less meetings?
Yeah.
Make it so you make it so you have 4 hours in the day that a developer has no meetings. You will get so much pushback. But if you want to make your developers better and more productive, give them 4 hours in the day, contiguous hours. It could be interrupted by lunch, where they don't have meetings.
I I very much agree, Jan, that there's a fear on the part of the manager, right? And like Steve was saying, the problem is that they get pushed from above, and it really is a culture thing. It really is, and we are reward. Can't say the word. We're giving rewards for producing, for getting things out the door, and that's a horrible culture, right? It's nice to get a reward. It's nice to get recognized for doing a great job and being as effective as we can. But that sort of culture drives that fear, and especially if you don't make your numbers or whatever, you get that fear. The management definitely hears about it, which means that the development team hears about it, and the developers don't want to. That's why they want to have all this time. I want to have heads down time, not because they really don't get it so much, or it's that because if they don't finish their work, they're gonna get in trouble. This is, if you, I'm gonna use a Scrum example, like if you roll a ticket, like even if you're very close to the end, in a lot of places that's a negative, right? Where it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. This is just the iteration is just a check-in point. But if you roll a ticket from one iteration to the next, well, you haven't done your job correctly, right? And we keep pushing that fear. And how do we deal with that? That's a totally different and hard question. And it has to be. I don't know, I can't give you an easy answer, but one of the things, there's always, you can appeal to, you can appeal to the, that wanting to do the best thing for the company, wanting, it will make my life easier and our ability to produce more in the future if I go talk to this other guy right now, so that he can understand where we're going or whatever. We solve the problem Therefore, later there's not a problem when we need to extend our code or add this new feature or whatever. You can appeal to that. You know, you could, if there's a person who feels very safe on the team, or you could they could stand up and say, hey, look, this needs to happen. But it's a really tough situation to be in especially without a third party. This is where your scrum coach, your technical coach, someone that's external necessarily to the team can come in. And because I've been in those places. I've been in that, not as the manager, but definitely as the developer, where I'm like, gosh, I should, but I can't. Right. And at the time, I didn't feel the safety of saying, I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. No, it's you got to protect your job. I mean, I totally get that one. Yeah, it was just very hard because we, as QAs, we weren't getting what we needed. We needed to understand what it was, what it should do, and we had questions on that. And I guess the thing, you always make sure that you've researched things well and you don't waste people's time. But there comes a point where this person you couldn't get any time with them.
Yeah. So maybe, and just a second, Moss, and I'm just going to add a real quick one. One of the ways that I often talk to people who are reticent to trying different things, and I'll pose this with the example of getting senior developers to try pairing or mobbing, right? One of the ways that I often pose it is, I need your help, right? I need your help because, you're smart, you have all the knowledge, these other people on the team could really use your help as well. Can you help me by pairing, like maybe there's this opportunity to go to that manager and go through that, like, this is really important and you'll look good if you can just give us, a couple hours with a person to help us. That sort of thing really tends to at least loosen the screws a little bit. But
okay, yeah, just say, you could really help us out. I mean, we know, you know what's going on, and this will give good results, and it'll be good for you in the long run as well.
Yeah, I mean, you come at it from this aspect of, we're all here to get better, but you could really help. And I know that you've got a lot of experience, and I know that you're working hard, and all these, all those sort of things. Like, but boy, that is a tough situation.
Yeah, it was.
Moss, did you?
I was just going to mention that we're running out of time, but I don't know if we have time for one more question. Megumi put a question in the chat about, what are the technical skills that developers wish QAs would have to be better collaborators? Now, there's probably we don't have enough time to cover that, but is that something that you guys just have like one or two points that you might want to think about?
That's a hard one. Well, and mainly because I don't see like a difference. I tend to work less nowadays with teams or companies that have a separate QA team, right? So the QA, the person that is strong in QA, if we're talking about that T-shape, understands and is an advocate for the customer, and understands, the communication is important, and understand with the developers, and understands that oh, maybe it's about talking. If you talk to developers, you have that discussion, that communication, talk in a way that is not, they did their best at the time they did the work, for the work that they knew and what they knew when doing that work. right? We understand this. There's always been that kind of back and forth between developers and QA. Gosh, even years ago when I was a game developer, those darn QA people, like, because they would find our bugs and they'd come back and tell us it was wrong. And they were right, but nobody wants to hear that my code is bad or I wrote a bug or whatever, right? So try and frame your discussions in this, again, kind of going back to what I was saying to Jan. We're in this together. We're all here to do the right thing. I'm not saying this because I think you did a bad job or whatever, but because I know that quality is important to the developer just as much as it is to me, just as much as it is to the company, right? Like if you can kind of perfect that aspect of having that discussion, I think that for me is much more than learning to code or learning about patterns or learning whatever, right? But crazy. It's all about communication, isn't it? Steve, did you have a thought on that?
My initial reaction was mobbing TDD pairing skills. And as you were talking about it, I was thinking, a lot of it is just communication. So finding a effective way to garner collaboration, which resorts to, another topic of everything I learned to do about software development, I learned in kindergarten, but it was trained out of me as I got older in my professional life. And now I'm having to learn how to be a kindergartner again.
I have a comment kind of question on that, because in school, as you learn coding, it's go do this assignment, bring it back to me. It should work when you give it to me. When you give it to me, it's done. That's how we learn code. How do you teach that communication in the terms of code?
What communication?
Like how to communicate about, not just communicate, but communicate about your code when you have given a bunch of new developers or developers who've been working in silos for years. That team says, oh, well, we do our thing. How do you get them to communicate, to learn those kindergartner skills again?
Oh, it's a long road, but little by little.
You slowly dip their toe in it with an hour a week saying, hey, let's get together and let's just look at code and see what we like about it and what we don't.
Not in production, right? Like we often talk about like, learning time. Let's write FizzBuzz. If you know Steve, let's go do FizzBuzz. Let's pair on it. Let's practice it. Let's talk about it, right? Which is different than, hey, can you come help me work on this class that I'm working on? There's a different power dynamic when you're working on something that's going to go into production versus working on something that you're going to throw away.
Well, right? I was just talking about code to begin with. Period.
Yes.
Nothing gets checked in.
Yep.
It's slow. It's like giving one kid a ball and say, okay, go play, go find some friends and play. And they'll figure out one little thing and go from there. So it's baby steps. Sorry,
didn't mean to interrupt. Do you guys ever do any sort of code kata stuff with QA people? Practice like that?
So I would say there's never a time we do it without QA, because to me, QA is part of the team, and so we're all doing it together. That's my assumption and probably my blind side, that when I'm talking about, we're doing exercises or learning or whatever, I'm assuming that QA, the product owner, the product manager, they're all involved. They're invited and encouraged to come.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, I'm right there. I don't think that we do any sort of teaching or practices that are role specific in terms of like only developers, only senior developers, only QA. Nope. You know what? You want to learn something, you want to get better, you want to become a stronger team. Let's all just practice and work on it together. Doesn't matter where you're at in your career or what your role is.
Sounds great.
So-
Yeah, while we're at the one past the 1:30 mark, so I'm glad for all the people that stuck around and to the wouldn't say the bitter end. It was actually a pretty good end.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, Steve, and thank you, Paige, for speaking at the meetup. And I put their LinkedIn profiles into the chat so you can see that there. And this session is recorded and we'll post it on the PNSQC YouTube channel later, and I can